Imagine a gallery of classical art, where every frame is meticulously engineered to dictate exactly where your eye falls. For decades, Hollywood prioritized invisible editing, crafting seamless, unobtrusive windows into narrative stories. Stanley Kubrick violently rejected this practice. He operated as a formalist rebel. He developed a methodology defined by total optical dictatorship. Kubrick's films function as highly calculated architectural canvases, where the spatial geometry of the frame dictates the emotional subtext. By weaponizing optical engineering and spatial geometry, he flattened the cinematic image, trapping his audiences inside a deterministic, painterly reality. To see this optical dictatorship at work, look at his recreation of the 18th century. Conventional artificial cinematic lighting could not capture the authentic melancholy of the era. We observe his visual benchmark in this photograph of Johannes Vermeer's painting, The Milkmaid. Notice the soft, natural directional light pouring over the subject. A secondary benchmark is visible here, in Thomas Gainsborough's classical oil portraiture. The lighting is immersive, significantly flattening the subject's depth. Replicating this on film presented a severe mechanical constraint. The standard Eastman Kodak 100T film stock was simply too slow to capture a scene illuminated by a mere 3-foot candles of candlelight. The solution to this low-light problem originated in the Apollo lunar program. Kubrick acquired 3 exceedingly rare Carl Zeiss 50mm f/0.7 still lenses, initially commissioned by NASA to photograph the dark side of the moon. Engineers physically milled and cut a Mitchell BNC 35mm camera body to accommodate the massive Zeiss lens. Tracing the light path through this modified rear element reveals an impossibly narrow focal plane of exactly 1.7 inches. This hyper-shallow depth of field flattened the z-axis of the motion picture, physically mimicking the historical paintings we just examined. The optical engineering deliberately strips the characters of three-dimensional autonomy. They are rendered as trapped subjects, pinned within a deterministic historical canvas. This strict control over the viewer's eye extends to massive architectural spaces. Traditional cinematography often relies on the naturalistic, visually pleasing geometry known as the rule of thirds. Kubrick opposed this with an obsession for absolute authoritarian symmetry, driven by the one-point perspective. This geometric overlay visualizes the mathematics. A strict crosshair locates the exact dead center vanishing point of the architecture. From this nexus, every parallel line in the set design, the walls, the floors, the corridors, is manipulated to converge perfectly inward. This composition forces your eye inexorably toward the center of the screen, manufacturing a feeling of highly artificial institutional control. He amplified this panoptic distortion by coupling it with extreme wide-angle lenses, like the Canoptic 9.8mm. This relentless geometric perfection acts as a psychological hostility. The architecture becomes an active antagonist, simulating the omniscient gaze of a cold authoritarian system. Within these rigid optical environments, conventional psychological acting becomes a liability. Performances relying on projected warmth or legible emotional arcs would shatter the sterile geometry. To solve this friction, Kubrick employed an aesthetics of exhaustion. He routinely demanded dozens, sometimes hundreds of takes for a single brief shot. The purpose of these grueling repetitions was the systematic stripping away of an actor's rehearsed Stanislavskian armor. He sought behavioral raw material, a spectrum of highly mechanized, post-human micro-expressions he could construct in the editing room. When a character's suppressed trauma or madness finally fractures this distant state, it manifests in a specific visual rupture known as the Kubrick stare. This wireframe mapping deconstructs the exact physiognomy required. The actor must lower the brow, tilt the head slightly down, track the eyes directly upward from beneath the brow ridge, and hold an asymmetrical smile. This specific arrangement of facial muscles signifies the exact moment when psychological chaos violently breaks through the mechanized order of the frame. This intense architectural control applies equally to the abstract dimensions of time and sound. In classical editing, temporal transitions are strictly subordinate to moving the narrative plot forward. Kubrick utilized the Deleuzian time image. he decoupled visual duration from narrative progression entirely. The clearest application of this theory is the space-time cut executed in 2001: A Space Odyssey. This horizontal timeline maps the immense scale of the edit. On the left, we place prehistoric hominid weaponry, represented by a spinning bone. On the right, an advanced orbital satellite. A single 24-frame cinematic splice instantly bridges a 4 million-year gap in human evolution. The speed of this cut delivers a strict philosophical argument. Nuclear satellites are merely advanced extensions of primate clubs. He reinforced this temporal dislocation by actively rejecting comforting, melodic Hollywood scores. He layered the vacuum of space with micro-polyphonic avant-garde textures from composers like György Ligeti, and weaponized the absolute absence of sound. By coupling radical temporal abstraction with modernist acoustic architecture, he forces the audience into active philosophical contemplation regarding mankind's cosmic insignificance. Stanley Kubrick's filmography stands as a library of moving, transgressive fine art, where every frame serves a rigorous formalist agenda. He achieved optical dictatorship by mastering the physics of light, enforcing central panoptic symmetry, and fracturing temporal continuity. These techniques successfully formalized a new, self-reflexive cinematic language. Kubrick definitively proved that the camera is a surgical instrument, capable of gazing unblinkingly into the mechanical reality of the human condition. His architectural gaze remains the standard by which we measure the power of the cinematic image.